Hi everyone, it's James Stokes from Edge of Play. We're here with another Zoom meeting with two fantastic coaches that I'm delighted have agreed to come on and do a meeting with us. So at the start of this season, I was lucky enough to go down and observe a session at Colwyn Bay Football Club. And the two main coaches, Craig Hogg and Mark Orme, are here with me today. Hi guys, how you doing?
Not too bad. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you very much. How are you keeping during this? It's a bit of a crazy time at the moment.
It is a bit crazy, but I just think, for the greater good of, people being healthy, I think we have to be patient and sit on our hands a little bit. It's difficult from a coaching point of view because it's what we love doing. We do feel a little bit redundant at the moment, not being able to go out on the grass and coach. But I think, the bigger picture is the most important thing at the moment, and we're happy to play our part.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, ultimately, as Craig said, there's no hiding from the fact football's a big part of our lives, and it's strange. There's no doubt about that. But the bigger picture is far more important at the moment, and you have to be respectful of that and understand what's happening, what's going on, which obviously everybody does. And we just got to keep everybody safe and prepare for when we can get back to doing what we want to do.
Yeah, it's a big task that I think a lot of us are going to have to learn on the job, aren't we? As we're coming back to it. Thanks again so much for joining us. I think it's really good at a time like this that we can just have these chats and make this content available to coaches so that we keep ticking over. Now, when I came down, the session I wanted to talk to you about today was when I came down to observe you running a conditioned 11-a-side game outside. Fantastic session. Loved it. Took more notes than I think I have all season at any session, which was brilliant. You ran it as a 2, but I'll let you explain how the session went. So yeah, I wanted to talk today about conditioned 11-a-side, or maybe if junior coaches are watching, conditioned 9-a-side, 7-a-side games that they might want to run. And just a little bit about paired coaching and how your dynamic works at Colwyn Bay, what you find really good about it, what are the obstacles that you have, a little bit about that. So yeah, I'll let you guys talk about how you structure a conditioned 11-a-side game and what benefits you look to get from it for Colwyn Bay.
I think from our point of view, regardless of whether it's a large-sided game or if it's some sort of function or a principle-based possession game, there has to be a purpose to it. There clearly has to be a need. So we, as a coaching team, we work out why we want to do it. Typically then it's moving into how we're going to deliver it within the area space that we've got to work with and the players. Working in the part-time model, we train them once or twice a week. Players work. You've still got the same targets to deliver from a training point of view in terms of tactical periodisation, fitness levels, and the content of the session leading into a Saturday, of course. But also you've got to be adaptable because numbers can change and coaches working in the part-time game can, really, really understand that. Then taking it into really, everything that we try to do as a coaching team is linked into our principles and philosophy of play our game on. So regardless, again, of what the session is and how we hope to achieve and deliver it and who does what, it has to tie into how we believe as a management team we want to play the game. And the model is the blueprint. It is adaptable and it can change depending on the opposition that we may be facing. But it gives us that document, which really gives us that opportunity to formalise our thought processes to then go and have that blueprint to go and deliver the sessions that we feel is going to be a benefit to us in our football club.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the one in particular that you came down and observed pre-season, James, that was obviously part of our pre-season model. We planned for it. We knew we were going to have the capacity in terms of player numbers and also the facility to be able to do an 11-a-side. So there's a few different reasons why we did it that way. Obviously, it seems a long time ago now, but back in pre-season, we're obviously thinking about the physical load on the players as well. So making sure that they do the right amount of minutes. I think the fact that we always try and keep it competitive means that the intensity levels from the players were there, which you saw for yourself. I don't think that's an issue with the group that we've got, to be honest. Obviously, there's always that desire within training to make sure they come out on the winning side. But yeah, you're taking into account not just the technical side of what you want to get out of it. You're looking at the physical side. We're very big on, obviously, when we're planning for sessions, how long we're going to spend in each block, how long they get to recover. We're pretty rigid on that. We're not just going to, if we plan to do a 7-minute block, for example, we don't just let it run over by 2, 3, 4 minutes. We do 7 minutes, and then we'll have that break, and then they're back in. So, the 11-a-sides, I think we've predominantly used, obviously, in pre-season, but then we've also had that outside area available if we've had a game called off, for example, which we did a couple of times just after Christmas, because then it gives, you can get the lads in on a Saturday and they still get that 11v11 through the course of through the course of the season, predominantly based on, as Craig said, the part-time model, the facility that we've got, and the numbers. In terms of squad size for training, predominantly probably doing 9v9s really.
I enjoyed the intensity when I turned up. So I remember you lads went through a warm-up at the time, and then you had, just before the game kicked off, you had a very short 15x15 box. I think it's a 20x20 box. 2 of those, it was 4v4 in there, and you're just getting lots of touches on the ball. But you could see both of you took 1 box each, and you were there setting that intensity level right from the off. Before they even went into 11-a-side game, we're going to get plenty of touches on the ball here, but let's set the mental side of getting that intensity right. I think you then went into the pitch was split into thirds. I think, Craig, for the first section, you were working on building up play through the first 2 thirds, and then breaking lines in that once you got into that second third. And Mark, you matched off completely by taking a team that were looking to put some pressure on them up high, and then when they did win it back, just go direct to the strikers. So you already saw straight away there's a huge amount of thought gone into that. There's a lot of coaches that will I want to touch on here the difference between actually preparing a conditioned 11-a-side game and just game time. There are a lot of coaches that will just put on a game and maybe touch on a couple, but there's a huge amount of thought into this session. There were 3, I can't remember if they were 25 or 30-minute blocks, but there were 3 blocks. And for each block, you had a quick chat with the boys and you told them what was expected of them, and then went out and delivered against each other. So just how much time does it really take you to put into a session like that?
Typically, a session like that, like Mark was discussing before, there are a number of returns we're looking for. The 11v11 large side of the game gives you that element of realism. It's reflective of what you do on the Saturday. So the planning and detail that goes into that, we are looking at the fitness returns, from a tactical point of view, which was the key focus, I believe, of that session, was we had identified some of the teams that we were playing earlier on in the campaign, and how we would potentially look to exploit opportunities against them. And one of them was we envisaged some teams would get after us and press us aggressively. We envisaged some teams would drop off and go into a low to mid defensive block. So it was formulating and formalising those ideas and then planning it, and then the role of the coaches in between. It was agreed that I'd take the attacking principles, if you like, of breaking the lines and looking to play through, and Mark would create the problems for my team to overcome. And then in the second block, we swapped roles. Mark would take the role that I took, and then I would take the role that he took. So from a coaching point of view, we're both seeing it from both sides of the coin, if you like, but also from a tactical point of view and a session point of view, the players were also, that one team wasn't just cannon fodder for the other team, because everyone has to get some sort of development return from it from that tactical point of view as well. So the planning side of it for us is crucial. How we go about doing that is, it's about 15 phone calls a day. It's debriefs after training sessions. It's, debriefs after games. It's, we reflect. I wouldn't say we're thorough in terms of reflective writing, but I admit, I do keep a little diary and keep a little 3 good and 3 bad from everything, training sessions and games, etc.
Every single session?
Yeah, so 3 quick
Brilliant.
points, 3 good, 3 bad. At the end of a training session, and midweek training sessions, the staff will get together, we're literally getting the kit in and we're talking. Things are still fresh in our minds. If one of us is, we've forgotten to say something 24 hours later, it's a text message or a phone call, what do you think of this? We're coaches, we're learning, we're not perfect. you know. And I think that the most important thing you have to realise is, as a manager, as a coach, is, you know, it is trial and error. You are going to make mistakes, and having people around you that don't just agree with everything that you say is important. You need to be challenged as well. I challenge Mark, and Mark challenges me, but it's not to serve our egos as coaches. It's for the greater good of our football team. And so, you know, that honesty from, was it worthwhile? Did it serve the purpose of the session? Did we get the returns from it? How do we measure those returns? It sounds like a lot, but it isn't. It's just finding that way to formalise your thought processes, measure it, reflect on it, and go again. And obviously, the proof is always in the pudding on a Saturday when you get the 3 points. Yeah. And you play, especially at our level of the game, where, you know, senior non-league football, you know, winning games is important. But yeah, going into the session, we do enjoy sessions like that, because you know the players are enjoying the sessions as well, because it's realistic, it's competitive, and it's relevant to how we try to play as well.
I think that's the key point. And I think, James, you just mentioned there, what's the difference really between having a conditioned 11-a-side game and literally just playing 11v11 and just getting pitch time for players. Ultimately, for me, the difference is the planning. So you've got to understand what you're trying to achieve from the game itself. As Craig said there, we identified quite early who we would be playing, especially knowing the league that we're in. Some of the early away games that we had an idea of how we wanted to play. You know, we've probably changed that a good few times across the season, because again, as Craig's touched on there, you're constantly learning. You know, the system as such is not necessarily the most important thing. That can change, but you've got to have an idea of your principles and how you want to play. We knew that with the players that we were bringing in, we wanted to get the ball down and we wanted to play. Hence, Craig took the side who were trying to play forward, they were trying to break lines. So you've then got to give yourself problems, because if the opposition, who I was managing to begin with, if they're not engaging with it, if they're not playing as they realistically would on a Saturday, then Craig's team would have quite easily just broken lines, easy passes, no pressure on the ball, but you're not going to learn anything from that. So that's not realistic. So that's the aim. That was the aim between me having the opposition, and our key focuses for my team were: make sure you go and press the ball when you get it. I don't want you making 8 to 10 passes. I want you to go and be direct, because then I want to see how Craig's team copes with that. Can they get the ball down? Can they play forward when they're under pressure, as they would be in a realistic game situation? So there's a massive difference between just putting your players out, whether it's 9v9 or 11v11 at the end of training, and just saying, go and play for half an hour, and actually having some, because, you know, I don't know, I'm sure Craig would probably say the same thing. He'd correct me if he wouldn't, but the game at the end of a session, and this is at all clubs that I've worked at, that can probably be the most lethargic part of the session, unless you give them something to aim for. You know, players always talk about, you know, when can we have a game? When can we have a game? But if you just put them into a game and there's no realism, there's nothing on it, there's no purpose, there's no intensity, then you often find that actually that game is probably the worst part of your session.
Such a great point. It's such a really great point. Yeah, I mean, you touched on people enjoying the session. I really enjoyed it. One of the things I took from it is exactly what you've been speaking about. And you set up, or you coached, let me think about the way I'm going to phrase this. You coached a number of points about the opposition that you're going to play. So it was something that I picked up when I went and watched Ian Evatt at Barrow. You know, they were going through a session, but for 2 of the practices, he touched upon who they were playing on the Saturday, especially the big expansive 9v9 they did, that was very much set up that this team are going to hit you down the centre. This team are going to hit you down the centre, and you guys did exactly the same there. With a couple of the principles that you play, linking that into a conditioned game, is the conditioned game the end of a set of training sessions that you're going to do? Is it the beginning of a set of training sessions that you're going to do, or is it somewhere in the middle? And by that, I mean, if you're looking at breaking lines, building up play, breaking lines, would you do the way you would structure your sessions? Would you do a small session with a specific unit on breaking the lines and then take it into a condition game after? Or sometimes would you do the condition game, say, this is what I want from you? It's like the whole part whole, isn't it? That this is what I want from you. Now let's break it right down, grab your midfield unit, and then go and do a smaller session on that. What do you tend to do there?
I think the way that we work is the condition game for us is the end product of what the session plan is. So everything else is leading up to that. So, for example, the breaking line session, if we say, for example, we're doing a session on switching play, anything from the first topic of the session, the second topic might be some kind of tactical function. Going into the 11v11 game, we want to see returns of that. So we try to keep the theme flowing throughout as much as we can, depending on what the topic is. Yes, there's going to be occasions where you have to be adaptable, but if it's a build-up play type of session, then build-up play is the theme that runs right the way through. If for whatever reason, the session isn't working, then for a number of different reasons, then you're able to step in and make adjustments to it or change it. Still changing it though with a view to achieving the outcome of whatever the principal topic is on that day or that evening. So we do try to keep the theme running as much as we can right the way through. And again, it goes down to the communication between ourselves as coaches, the attitude we have around in terms of work rate and a desire to perform and work as hard as we can, of course. But regardless of what the topic is or the session planning, the training session is always driven by players. And the emphasis that we always try to put on our players as coaches as well is you're leading this session. We're providing you with the environment and the platform to go and play and enjoy your football. But at the end of the day, regardless of what the topic is or who's leading the session, players are empowered to go and drive the session themselves, because we're not on the pitch with them on a Saturday. We're on the touchlines, we're in the dressing room. We're giving instructions, yes, and we're giving support. But at the end of the day, they cross that white line, so they have to lead everything or as much as they possibly can, from our point of view.
Yeah, I think for me that's massively important. I think if you'd observed our training sessions across the whole of the season, I think it'd be fair to say they're not too dissimilar week to week. And what I mean by that is we were quite clear from last summer what we were looking for in terms of the players, how we wanted them to play. So if you've got key principles that you want to get into the players, ultimately you've got to be consistent with that. So you can't keep changing your mind week by week just because you want to be seen as putting something different on. Ultimately, there's variations, there's different ways of getting the players to break the line or to switch play, etc. But you've seen that game model that Craig's put together, and ultimately, yeah, there you go. I mean, that's what we believe in. That's what we want the players to do. When they've got the ball, that's how we want them to play. Out of the ball, out of possession. We want them to go and get it back quickly. Make sure that we're not getting split. So that's the basis for our training sessions.
Yeah.
So you see the training sessions, and then what you find, as Craig's touched on, if the players understand what you want from them, you'll put a particular practice on, and the players, they're bright, they pick up on what you're doing, so they understand that the aim is to switch the ball as quickly as possible. They know without us demanding from them that if it's a possession practice, if one team loses the ball, they know that they need to go and get it back as quickly as possible. We'll do little warm-ups where they have to go and, your standard rondo. I know it's a buzzword, but ultimately players enjoy them. And we've used one where it's a 4v2, and if there's two players in the middle, if they win the ball back within the first, I think it was about 5 passes, and both of them can get out. But if it goes longer than 5 passes, only the one who wins the ball back goes out. The other one has to stay in there. So it's in their interest to win the ball back as quickly as possible. So when we're telling them on a Saturday, lose the ball, go and win it back, well, they've been doing that all season without, it's nothing complicated. For me, the best practices are simple, and they stick to those principles that you can see on there.
It's such a good feeling as a coach, isn't it, when it starts coming from the players? It takes a while. So we have, funnily enough, at the club, myself and Jack coach, from defence to attack transition. We have the very same first word in secure possession of the ball in the way we want the lads to do. And it's taken probably half a season for some of the newer lads. The older lads kind of knew that anyway. But when you then break it down and then ask the players, if you do a bit of Q&A, what are we meant to be doing here? And they come back with those words that are in your game model or in your philosophy. It's a great feeling.
It's finding the language that's relevant to the players that you have and the level of football that you're working at. So when I say language, I mean in terms of the language of the game model, regain, secure the ball, balance and security behind the press, whatever it may be. It does sound highly convoluted, but at the end of the day, any training session that we deliver should naturally incorporate those 4 what we call moments in the game. Anyway, Mark said it before. We came on. Coaching's about it's borrowing and lending ideas from other coaches. We're the best thieves in the business, aren't we? In terms of adapting. These are ideas that I've taken and Mark's taken from other good managers we've played for or good coaches that we've worked with, and going to the FAW coach education program as well. But like I said, regardless of what content is on coach's model or their game plan or their playing philosophy, it's then translating that language into something that's understandable for the group of players that they're working with as well. And the more frequently we as coaches use those little phrases, the better, the greater the understanding becomes. And further down the line, 6 months, a year, 18 months, you come out with phrases and you hear players saying, speaking the same language as we are as coaches as well. So, we'd like to think that it's given everyone that route and that template to work from.
It's great, isn't it? And it's the understanding they have behind it. So it might be one word that they're saying, but that is weeks of coaches of saying, yes, that's the word, but here's what that word means.
Yeah.
Here's how you go and do it. Yeah, it's really fantastic, that. You just touched on this briefly. The last point I want to mention on the condition games before we go on to paired coaching. On a Saturday, you're not there with them. You're on the side, so those players need to go out and do everything that you've been coaching out on the pitch. When you do a condition game, how does your coaching differ from when you're doing a small-sided game, or when you're doing individual training, or when you're doing warm-ups? So in terms of like the coaching position that you'll take up, in terms of how much time you'll let the game flow, rather than your coaching interventions. So how often will you jump in, and what will you work on big whole team points, or will you still focus on individuals and units? How do you change as a coach in doing a conditioned 11-a-side game to doing maybe one where you're working with 6 to 8 players?
I think with the conditioned 11-a-side, again, it's got to be reflective of the Saturday. So in terms of our interventions, they're probably less volume of them. They are limited. The coaching style, I'd say, that we would use, I'm sure Mark would agree with it as well, is it's letting the ball roll. It's our interventions are limited to stepping in and stepping out, perhaps, unless it's a major key tactical coaching point in an 11v11 condition game, for example, where we feel that we've got to break it down and go through it again. And again, it's we're using the rest periods as well. Where players are resting and they're swapping over, swapping pitches, whatever it may be, swapping ends. We are coaching. It's the feedback, the information reinforcing points. Maybe what if, have you thought of, little phrases that we drop in. And then we go and grab people individually as well. What have you thought about this? What would you do in relation to the ball? If the ball's on that side of the pitch and you're here, how would you? And again, it's, you're constantly feeding, aren't you? Knowledge. But the other side of it as well is you're learning about your players, who's seeing what and who's learning what as well. So it would depend on the topic, I think, to summarise it. It depends on the topic, depends on what day of the week it is, how important it is to the Saturday. In terms of the interventions and the coaching styles that we use. From a coaching position, I'm one of those coaches that likes to be in the thick of it. You see some coaches that might go and stand in the four corners doing, a 15-minute session, spend a couple of minutes in each corner. I like to be in the thick of it because I feel like I'm learning more about my players. Mark likes to take an elevated position, especially when we train at the ground. He likes to be up in the gantry and get that bird's eye view because he's seeing the bigger picture. It is down to preference at the end of the day. But again, it's, not to say that one way or the other is wrong. It's just how we see the game in that first person or that third person who was it maybe. So it's to teach their own in that respect.
Are you going to get one of those huge video walls, Mark?
I wouldn't mind one. I think it's just one of them questions where, without sounding like I'm sitting on the fence, it's just there's just so much that you have to take into account. I mean, for me, I think your interventions. Look, the biggest thing that guides it for me is the fact that we're working in a part-time model. Okay, so we see those players once a week. We've got a 90-minute session with them, and even further back than that, I think it's led by the players that you've got. So, firstly, we know the people that we've brought in, and we know that they will drive a lot of the session themselves once they've got the basic idea of what you want from them. There's a reason for that. You bring players in who are intelligent and understand what you're asking from them, and then we've got a couple of senior guys in the group who played league football or won Welsh Premier League. So if they see that somebody's not pressing in a session, for example, me and Craig don't need to stop that. The players have already picked up on it, and they'll be driving. If that person's on their team and they're not putting a shift in, they'll do it for us. So my point and how that links into interventions is that ultimately, if we've got 90 minutes a week with them, which we have through the course of the season, players still want to feel like they've come out of a session and they've worked, and physically they've got something from it as well. That's my personal finding of working with senior players. And bear in mind that my opinion on this is based on where I'm working now, which is with seniors, because ultimately the main aim is what happens on a Saturday. You need to go and get 3 points. So your intervention for me with senior players during the course of the season, short and sharp, make your point, and then get out. Because I find if you're stopping it too much and you're going on for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, then you lose them a little bit. Now, that would probably completely change if we were ever lucky enough to work in a full-time environment, because you can taper it, and you've got certain days in the week where you do your walkthroughs and you do your match preparation and all of that. But we have one session a week, so we've got to be conscious of trying to get their physical preparation, the technical, and the tactical stuff all into one session. So you can't in a 90-minute session take up 20, 25 minutes, in my opinion, on interventions, because I think the players will think, well, stopping again. And you might have a really good point to make, but they've switched off to you because you've already stopped them 4 times previously.
Yeah, good point. I remember reading something from Damien Hughes about, it was the Barcelona way from Damien Hughes. He talks about cultural architects, which are exactly what you're talking about with the senior players that are either in the dressing room or out on the pitch that will reinforce your points for you. And it sounds like you've got a couple of crackers there that, they've been there and done it, but they're also listening to what you're telling them in the training. And then when you do a condition game or you go out on a Saturday, that's the one that on the pitch is going to tell the players what they need to be doing for pressing or what they need to be doing for breaking lines. That sounds really, really good. Right, just moving on to paired coaching, because I want to talk about the two of you and the relationship you had within the session and before and after the session, because it was a real highlight for me. I loved the environment. The players were enjoying themselves. You two were definitely competitive against each other in the game, which was
20 quid on it, James.
It was so good to see. And there was a little bit of banter in between the different blocks that you were doing, but then you both really want to win as well, which was great. So how, just thinking about before you go into the session, how do you split responsibilities? So you've come into a session like that, you're doing a conditioned game that's been broken into 3 sections. You've got one target of working on a team, building up through a couple of thirds and then breaking lines, one target of working on a team that will be putting on high pressure or a press and going direct. How do you say, right, I want to take that for the majority of the session and you should be taking that? How do you split those responsibilities between you?
Flip a coin. That's the top and bottom of it. No, it's I think as often as we can, we try to change our roles, if you like, within the session design. Who's doing what? I might lead a warm-up, for example, and Mark might take part 2, 3, and 4 of the sessions because we might feel like his skill set as a coach are better suited to delivering what we're trying to achieve on that evening or on that day. And vice versa. You know, if we feel it's something that's more principle based, you know, in terms of the rolling side of it, you know, Mark might want to put his hand on, so no, I'll lead this because of X, Y, Z. We don't really turn on to, I should be doing this because I'm better than this and what you are. We do literally sit down and say to him, what do you fancy doing? And because we trust each other that much, I think. No, I certainly do with where Mark's concerned in terms of what I believe his strengths are and where my weaknesses are and how they offset each other, and vice versa as well. So it's just having that understanding really of who's not who's better at what, but you know who wants to do what and why. We're both very capable of delivering a number of sessions, but the other side of it as well is that, you know, I think if you have the same voice leading sessions as well, you can lose player engagement as well. So it's also good and healthy for players to hear different voices from time to time as well, which I believe, you know, improves their learning and their understanding of things as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it will, for me, the paired coaching side of it boils down to the environment that you're in. So again, I refer back to the fact that, you know, we're in a senior environment where, you know, ultimately Craig's the manager. So, you know, he has to take responsibility for a lot of things in terms of people will look at him, you know, in terms of result, etc., etc. So, yeah, but he's a manager who coaches. Now, sometimes you might work with a manager who just says, right, you crack on, you know, you're the coach, I'll do X, Y, and Z. But, you know, Craig's a hands-on coach manager. So I think as the manager, you know, if I'm leading a session, for example, and he wants to step in and make a point, then he will step in and make a point because ultimately he's seen something that might have an effect on, you know, what happens in the game at the weekend, and he needs to get that point across. If Craig's leading something, I probably wouldn't just blow the whistle and step in because I don't think that's my role at that point. I think the way I'd rather do it is, you know, if he's leading that session, whether say it's the game at the end, for example, if I've maybe seen something that I think, oh, well, we could change that or we could change this, I'm not just going to step in and override that. I'd go around and just have a chat with him because I think that dynamic at senior level is important.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, if it's paired coaching at junior level, for example, I think that can be slightly different. I just think sometimes you don't do it deliberately, but sometimes when you're in the middle of coaching something, you might see something and you want to get that point out. But then if that's counterproductive to the point that's just been made, it can then be almost confusing for the players, and they can think, "Oh, hold on, Mark's just come in and said that, but Craig's been trying to work on that for the last 10 minutes." So, especially in a senior environment, you don't want to give that perception to the players.
I think that's where your game model comes in.
That's
where you're chatting with each other so often comes in, because I remember you stepping in, Mark, for a point, and I don't even think it was about passing lines down the wide. I think the winger or one of the midfielder was cutting off the ball into another player. But Craig backed your point up straight away. And I remember Craig making one about rotation in midfield, and you backed the point up from that. And if you've got two coaches, especially paired coaching, it must be so good as a player to have that point reinforced. So you're hearing it from one coach, you then hear it from the other coach. It's the same point. It's, you're getting it twice.
Yeah.
And that's because you work so much on this game model and the language.
And exactly that. Your game model is your hymn sheet. The expression is singing from the same hymn sheet. For us, I'd like to think we've got a good understanding of, yes, each other as coaches, but also how we want to play the game. Our game model is crucial to that as well. So any coaching points, if Mark's leading a session or if I'm leading a session, whoever is assisting in that element of the session, whoever steps in to coach, you are naturally reinforcing what's being said. Anyway, there's no contradiction because it's an agreed model between the management team, the coaching staff. This is how we want to play. Yeah, there's a buy-in from the players, of course, but we bring in the players in that we feel can, drive the game model forward. We put this model together, rightly or wrongly. So whenever there's coaching points to be made or sessions to be delivered, we're going back to our play sheet, which we know, I think, verbatim, word for word. So, anything that we're reinforcing or reiterating, it's the language that we're using from a document that we put together anyway.
Yeah, it was really, really good. Sorry, go on, Mark.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, I think for me, yeah. So that's like I said previously. I think if you look at a lot of our sessions, which we're reinforcing the same messages consistently, so that when you do see things, it almost becomes second nature. So there is no contradiction. And then I think the other point I was really trying to get across is, for me, it's just important that it's not voices over the top of each other. Even if you are, yes, you're still singing off the same hymn sheet and you've got the same messages, but if you're constantly trying to step in and you're both speaking quite a lot, even if it's the same messages, it's still a bit, sometimes it can be a bit of overload. So I think that Craig mentioned it before about, sometimes a different voice taking a different part of the session. Quite often, because I've got a physical background, so I'll tend to do a lot of the warm-ups and then a lot of the the high intensity stuff, the possession. But then quite a few times we've flipped that, and Craig's done the warm-up and the possession, and then I've gone into something that's a little bit more tactical. Just so like I said, different voice, but it's a different voice putting the same messages across. So
absolutely, yeah.
You then don't need to both be speaking for a 20-minute practice consistently, because the players just need to hear that one voice, and then you can just go around and back up some key points to individuals.
Did you have
another important part of coaching as well is, it's being able to observe. So if somebody else is leading part of the session, you're giving yourself that 10-15 minute period where you can step back and see, well, are people and players taking on board what we're trying to get across? If they're not, giving you opportunity to learn about Mark as a coach, of course, you see him in action, but also see your players in action as well. Are they taking on board what's being said? And so having that period, that time to observe as well, and letting somebody else lead the session, it's massive. It's hugely important, helping with your own development as a coach as well.
There are a lot of coaches out there, a lot of clubs out there that will probably want a model like that or want a relationship like that. Did you have, I know the session I observed was great, really loved it. Did you have those times when you did speak over each other or you did clash? And not only that, but what other kind of complications did you have? I mean, just speaking before this, Craig, I know we were talking about you and Mark have known each other years from when you used to clash on the football pitch, but as an actual coaching pair, what kind of obstacles have you had?
That's a difficult question to answer, to be honest with you. I think, from the message that we're trying to get across, it's always been very similar or the same. In terms of respect for each other as coaches, manager and assistant manager, I wouldn't have thought Mark was actually my first signing as a as a manager, when we moved back into the Welsh system, he was the first person I signed to bring on board as part of the backroom staff. So, in terms of, we'll have disagreements on perhaps opinions, not in terms of so much how we can deliver sessions or, the topic content of a training session, but in terms of, tweaking things here and there. I wouldn't say we've had full-on screaming, shouting matches with each other, but, we're both strong-willed people. We believe the game should be played in a certain way. But again, it's making sure that whatever we're trying to achieve is for the greater good of the team, which is always the case. But I think, having that honest relationship with each other, did that work? Mark would be the first person I speak to after the training session. What did you think? And they'll tell me straight, I think that worked. I didn't think that worked. X, Y, Z. I'll be the first person he speaks to after a session and go, you think that worked? Now, it's not us having doubt in ourselves or second guessing ourselves. It's asking, I think, people that we trust, what do you think? What does it look like from the side? Because, we want to be the best coaches that we can be. This is the highest level of football that we work at. We want to be the best coaches that we can be at this level. So you've got to be able to, be prepared for someone to turn around and say, think that worked, Craig.
Yeah.
And then it's then having a thick skin and being honest with yourself, like, why didn't it work? And then, not rebuilding something, but looking at it critically and then looking to change and adapt it, for the next time that you've got contact with your players. But the most important thing is it's an opinion from someone that you respect and trust as well. I think that's a crucial part of our relationship with the coaching staff.
Yeah, that trust word is so key. Because I know I was talking to a coach about critiquing your own sessions, and I can get defensive over my own sessions. But if you realise that the person actually doing it is only doing it because they're trying to help you, and as you say, trying to push each other on, I think that's really key point.
I don't think, being genuinely honest, I don't think we've had an issue with a single training session in terms of a difference of opinion or not agreeing on something with training. I mean, yeah, look, if you go onto the other side of what we have to do, which is ultimately the game at the weekend, there's been plenty of times this season where we've had conversations where you might not necessarily agree on team selection and stuff like that. There's probably been more times where we've agreed to disagree on certain things around that side of it. But again, that's, as Craig's already mentioned, that's what my job is to challenge him in terms of what he thinks is best. But then ultimately, it's also my job that it's he makes that decision, and then I back it up. In terms of training, genuinely, I couldn't think of one. And what I mean by that, I'm not saying every session that we've done has been perfect, because there's no such thing as a perfect coach. But because we do take so much time agreeing on who's delivering what and what the session plan is, there hasn't been a session where it's like, oh no, I don't think we should do this. I think we should do that. The session side of it, personally, I think has taken care of itself since we came, since we started last June, I think. And I think, in fairness, I think the players have to take a lot of credit for that as well, because I don't think we've ever come away from a training session and said, oh, they weren't at it, they didn't do this, they didn't do that. I think the players, in fairness, have been an absolute credit. I think every training session is competitive. I generally couldn't think of one where you think, well, they didn't really put it in. So I don't think training has been an issue from day one, really.
How much do you reflect? You spoke about it a few times. Not much. How long? So, for example, when I finished observing, you were obviously popping up to just talk about the session that you just run. How long do those kind of debriefs last?
Straight away, I think we're talking about 10, 15 minutes after a session. Maybe 15 is a little bit too long. I'd say, yeah, a good 10 minutes. And we're just thrashing out what worked well, what didn't work well. Obviously, when you're getting in your car and you're driving home, or whether later at that evening, like after a game, you're reflecting on what worked and what didn't. Massive tool for me is I've got a little brown notebook that I do my in-game notes on, and the first thing that I record my thoughts on straight after the training session. It's literally 3 points, 3 good, 3 bad. You know, I'm quite thorough in my day-to-day job when it comes to record keeping and stuff like that. But I think it's the skill I've taken over into football with me as well. Just making sure that I've got a quick record and put my thoughts down on paper of what's worked well and what hasn't worked well. Mark's, 3 good, 3 bad might be different, when he gets into his car or however he records it. But again, it's making sure quickly that we have that conversation after the training session. So, what did you think? Why did you think it? Why do you think it didn't work? Why do you think it did work? And then it's giving us some kind of foundation, to work from the next session, be that good or be that bad as well. So the learning experience of being a coach, you learn something new every single week about the game, about people, about yourself. And it's just making sure that you be honest how you record it, because writing it down, what's good and what's bad, is a massive part, I believe, of being honest with yourself as well, which is a hugely important thing in coaching football.
I guess you can see trends as well in what you're writing down. Is there something that keeps popping up?
Yeah,
a few weeks in a month.
Go to a player and say 17 times now because you give them the ball away on in a training session or whatever. It's a trend that happens. I suppose it is something like that, but it's giving you that little document just to look at quickly. When
17 is a very specific number.
Well,
that's definitely happened with a player, that hasn't it?
No, it hasn't, not at all. But it's I wouldn't say with that for recording individual players and but again it's writing our thoughts down. There might be 3 good, 3 bad in terms of the session itself, or it could include players, but it's giving you something to record from. The reflective side, going through the coach education program in Wales, they're massive on it, reflecting what worked and what didn't work. But also I think that can become quite repetitive. You might be saying or seeing the same thing week in, week out as well. So how good a tool it is, it depends on the coach really. From my own point of view, I do like to keep notes at the best of time when it comes to coaching, because I feel it helps me when I come to plan and formulate the next session plan that we might be working on. But that contact, that verbal contact with, again, someone you trust as a coach, I believe is as equally important as keeping some kind of documents to back up what you're talking about as well.
Yeah, I think as well. Reflection's only reflection if it actually makes you change something. If you reflect on something, but then you go and keep doing the same thing, well, what's the point in reflecting? Something I've certainly taken on board the last couple of years is it's no good waiting until after the session. If you can see something's not working in the session, go and change it. Whether that be something like just changing the area size can make a massive difference. It's all we've spoken at length in terms of how much detail we go into with planning, which is important. But ultimately, sometimes you can put it down on paper as much as you want, but then you go and you start dropping those cones and you think, oh, I'm not sure, this might be a bit small, it might be a bit big. It's not really getting the returns that I want from the practice. So change it there and then. As I've said a couple of times already, we've only got an hour and a half with those players. I'm not going to waste 10 minutes of practice because my area size is too big. I'll stop it and I'll make it smaller there and then. And then you make a note afterwards on the plan that you've put together. Yeah, that was the practice itself was good, but ultimately, initially, the area size was too big, so that you've got that note for the next time you run the practice. That actually, instead of it being a 20 by 20, it needed to be a 15 by 15. So you reflect as you're going, because otherwise you're just paying lip service to it. You're reflecting on something, but then you don't change it the next time you do it. You've got to change something for it to be reflection.
Terrific point. I mean, it's only fair that we ask that of players, don't we? Go out and make mistakes out on the pitch, but when you make a mistake, learn from that mistake. And as coaches, we're going to do the same. We're going to go out and make mistakes with area sizes, or not setting it up in a good location, or not getting the right task that keeps the intensity involved. So yeah, it's that. I've seen so many coaches that will set up with too big an area size and they will just carry on with it and until the time is done, it's great that you're jumping in and just changing
I think that's because it's potentially perceived as a sign of weakness. Yeah. If you stop and change, are you worried about what the players are thinking? Oh, here we go. This guy doesn't know what he's doing. He's having to stop it already and change it. But that's not my experience of it. I think it shows that you're more confident in what you're doing if you realise it's not working. And I think players are bright enough to realise that, because if you just let something run and they're not getting anything out of it, but you hold your hand up and say, hold on, just go and get yourself a quick drink, I'm just going to change it. And then all of a sudden they come back in and they can see noticeably that the practice is more effective. They're not going to have a problem with the fact that you stopped it. So I think, that's something I've spoke about with coaches on coach education. It's not that is for me part of coaching. Seeing something, realise it's not working, stopping it and changing it. It's not a weakness. For me, it's a strength.
Absolutely love that point. Well, yeah, I think that's all the points that I had on paired coaching, unless you guys wanted to touch on anything else that you've got down.
No, I just think where paired coaching is concerned, as coaches, we are going to make mistakes. Just to finish off really well, the point you just made there, you have to sometimes accept as well that you are going to make mistakes. The biggest and bravest thing you can do in coaching is actually put a whistle and stopwatch around your neck and go out and try and lead a training session. For me, that's a real sign of character and bravery, because you're coaching 15, 20 people, you're leading a session, you've got to get them to buy into what you're trying to do. You've got to try and get something out of it as well. And at the end of the day, you've probably got 15 or 20 experts and opinions as well, what they should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing as well. So it's being a coach is, I believe, it's a position of authority, but it's something that as well, I think you've got to give yourself a lot of credit for doing as well. But part of that as well is managing expectation and also managing people's opinions as well. Never be afraid of making mistakes. I think I'm going to look back to my early days as a coach, not long after I finished playing. And my biggest fear was that the session not working or not going to plan. And once I'd made those mistakes and had some disastrous training sessions, which I've had, things haven't gone to plan or gone the way I hoped. It's like falling off your bike. It's getting back on your bike again and going and doing it again. I think, we've got to accept that you're going to make mistakes, but it's part of learning. It's what we're striving to be. Like I said before, this is the highest level that you work at in football. I want to be the best that I can be, but part of that journey is tripping up and falling over as well. But as long as you've got people who you place your faith in and safety net around you, will give you honest opinions as well. I think that's hugely important. So getting that team is massive. Be prepared to make mistakes. Be prepared to fail, but have like-minded people around you who'll be honest and straight with you as well. Because when you have good days and bad days, they'll still be there for you.
It was very, very evident that you're two like-minded coaches and that you've got a great relationship when you're out on the pitch. Pick that up from the first 5 minutes of watching the session. Really, really good.
I think that's important. Sorry, James, just to finish on that. I think it's important as well that the point I'd make on paired coaching is obviously, because I know obviously you might have senior coaches or junior coaches as well who are looking at this. It's just, for me, it's understanding your role. So if you are working with somebody, it's not a competition to get all your points out across at once. You take into account your planning. You know which part of the session you're leading. You know which part of the session that you're more of the assistant type, if you like, and that you're helping the other person out. But certainly from that senior point of view, I think that game model is important, because then when you are given a message, it's going to be the same message, because you both understand what you're trying to get across into your players.
Yeah, perfect. Well, we'll wrap it up there, if that's okay with you guys. Thank you again so much for your time today. It's been great chatting to you. Loved my session with you. It's very evident that Colwyn Bay are in very good hands, and I'm sure the club will flourish with both of you there. Love to work again with you in future if the opportunity arises. But until then, you guys just take care. Yeah.
Thank you, James.
Cheers, James.
Thanks. See you later.
Okay, bye.